Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday, February 27th Working Group LTS meeting. My name is Jeremy, and I'll be the host today. Just a reminder before we get started, this meeting is covered by the CNCF Code of Conduct and the Kubernetes Code of Conduct. So just be mindful of things you say. Since I wasn't here last time, does anybody want to quickly summarize any next steps we wanted to cover today? Does anybody have any ideas about next steps that we want to kind of take? I think my perspective from the data didn't show a lot of people that would maybe strongly benefit from LTS. I think it showed people would probably benefit from the ability to skip upgrades. That seemed like a pretty common ask. Um, Anybody want to take it from there and share your thoughts? Discuss what we might want to try to accomplish next.
Pulling up the slides to review again from last time.
I concur with what you were saying, Jeremy, about it's not that people want LTS as much as they don't want painful upgrades. They don't want disruption. So if they can have skip upgrades, if they can have less disruptive, then the LTS is almost incidental to they want to be able to upgrade. They want it to not be terrible.
Hi, Jordan.
Yeah, I think one thing that I have observed just on like outside of the data that we did gather is that it's uh often the biggest and most well-funded like platform teams are doing a pretty good job generally at like staying on somewhat maintained versions. And it's the typically financial customers that are on these older versions, the less resource teams that get really stuck. Yeah, I don't know if that really came through in the data, but and I don't know that, yeah, or those were well represented in the data either. But we do like we still see
Mhm.
customers who are straggling on 21 and 22.
Yeah, I think one thing we didn't ask in the data that might have been useful was the market segment they're in. We kind of did with like the do you face any regulatory compliance? But that can straddle a whole litany of things. So that might have been an interesting thing to understand. Jordan, since you joined late, we were just discussing kind of takeaways from last week, looking at the meeting notes, and just generally from the data. Doesn't seem like there's a huge population of at least of the respondents where like an LTS release would be something that would be life changing for them, or something that really pushes the needle. Did seem like the ability to skip upgrades or to have a more seamless, less disruptive upgrade process would be something that would benefit a lot of folks, but not necessarily something that is an LTS release. Curious what your thoughts are if you had a chance to look at any of the data.
I have not had a chance. That does generally mesh with what I've observed.
Mhm.
Like the people who are stuck seem to be stuck on specific older things, like at specific boundaries, like 121 and 125, and uh, improvements to those things uh, in newer versions, so we don't have roadblock releases like that. Um, seem to be a better way to address that. And then, like, again, nothing we're going to do now or
We'll
a
fix
year from
that.
now is going to help with 121 and 125. And so, like, if there are people stuck at specific points in the past, figuring out, like, are there tools that we could give them? Are there, pre-flight checks we could, commands that would be helpful to run against a 121 cluster, scrape your metrics and scrape your whatever, migration commands for manifests. Like, but that's more like go fix history, go help people who are
Mhm.
stuck in the past, not like do things to help in the future for issues that we've actually stopped causing. Um,
But communicating what you just said to those people might help them understand that if what they see is upgrading is terrifying and awful, and if I upgrade this time, it'll be terrifying and awful next time and next time and next time. Like it may be some messaging around, yes, we know that getting off of the really old version you're on right now feels terrifying and awful, but your upgrades in the future won't be like that. Like maybe that would give people hope.
Like it can feel like a treadmill. Absolutely. Like we're going to do all this work, and then as soon as we're done, we're going to have the same work to do because we'll be a year behind still. Um, uh, yeah, that's we've kind of communicated that in bits and pieces, like with specific efforts, but a holistic, like the goal of the project is to have no action required upgrades. And here's the progress we're making towards that goal. Here are categories of things that will not be issues for you in future releases. Starting in this version, this is not an issue. Starting in this version, this is not an issue. That would be a good kind of blog post slash documentation page. We talk about skew. We kind of get into the weeds of things, but just as a posture, like the goal of the project is no action required upgrades.
When you say blog posts, do you think that there is a specific thing coming out and maybe going GA in an upcoming Kubernetes release that would make sense for the blog post to be aligned with that? Or
132 is when our last historical beta API turns off. So like 130, I mean, in 129, we have GA versions of everything. So as of 129, you can actually use all the GA versions in default clusters and not be exposed to any unstable APIs. In 132, the last unstable API that was on by default turns off. So we kind of missed the train for a 129 blog post, I guess, but we could still do it. Like a lot of people are kind of picking up 129 now or soon.
Yeah.
So that would be fine. So I would either say now, sort of tied to 129, or prepping it for 132. But 132 is
It's a ways away still.
yeah.
I would say doing that now would be a good time frame. It's ahead of 130, but it's long enough after 129 that people are probably picking it up, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
I think. Oh, go ahead.
Something else that came up this past week, like sort of the ethos of no action required releases and like really pushing on support windows and things. We are taking that ethos upstream to our dependencies. So trying to make sure we're coordinating with like etcd folks. So the etcd working group or the etcd sig, making sure like the patch minor versions that Kubernetes uses like are still getting security backports. And then like the containerd 2.0 stuff that I don't know if anyone saw this, but containerd 2.0 transition has some possible bumps, and so like working with the containerd folks to say, hey, can we make 1.7 support windows align with like the current Kubernetes versions, so the people who are on them don't fall off the edge of containerd support. So it's more than just Kubernetes, but sort of boosting visibility to, like, if you're using Kubernetes, you need to be thinking about these things, but we also are thinking about these things and trying to work with key dependencies, so Go and etcd and containerd, to try to make the whole story better for consumers. Yeah, I don't know if that connects to what we were just talking about, but it's top of mind for me. It does people very little good. Like Kubernetes is supported, but all the things underneath Kubernetes fell off support, and now you're in a mess still.
Yeah, I think that ties into what we were saying. The one thing that stuck out to me, I think, beyond the difficulty upgrading with APIs and whatnot, we looked at some of the scenarios for data, and the second one was people who were stuck. There weren't a lot that seemed like they were, out of all the responses, there were 121 that were running 124 or older as their oldest version. 50 of those were 121 and older. And the first most cited thing was features were removed, which would be the beta APIs going away, I would guess. But the second most common one was cost or disruption as a blocker. And that was true across even folks that were running newer things. So I think the folks with the bigger clusters are still having a hard time doing the actual upgrades, and that's probably where skipping things would come in handy. Again, like that's not gonna, if we do something now, it's not gonna help them back on 121 to be able
And
to
it-
get to
Uh,
that point.
was the cost primarily on the node side? Like,
Yeah.
so nodes can skip versions. Do people know that? Like,
Or I
Do
don't know if they know
people
that.
okay,
That might be another good thing to include in the
Yeah.
blog as a
And
data
also
point.
like the change, we landed in 128.
I mean, that lets them
But-
skip 3 versions. But even
But are
before that,
people really, but if people have an essential to their lives production cluster, are they really going to be like, let's see if some of the nodes are okay after we totally screw them up? Yay. Like that strikes me as difficult
okay, maybe
to
I'm misunderstanding
sell
cost
to
of-
people.
I was taking cost of disruption to be like, it's expensive to sort of provision extra nodes to get capacity before you drain the old nodes. Maybe they meant it generically. Like, if there's a problem, it's business ending for us.
Business ending, but also like we don't have the capacity or the money to run 2x.
Yeah, that's another common one. And we can't we can't evict pods from this node because they're critical things, and there's nowhere for them to be bounced to for us to go do the upgrade without disrupting that workload.
Okay. Okay.
And then doing that multiple times.
This maybe feels like a distinct topic that would be really good to like give people pointers to. So I think you and I talked, Jeremy, like there are some things that the project has available, like skipping node upgrades or doing canary nodes. Like, you don't have to 2x your cluster. You can bring up a few nodes, make sure they're healthy, and drain like one node of your old pool and move the workloads over. Like, you don't have to 2x.
Right.
But I don't know that people are aware of these things or make use of them. And so if people think, oh, I have to ripple all my nodes for every miner, like, that's huge. I can't deal with that. It's like, actually, you don't have to do that. If they think, oh, I have to 2x first to avoid disruption, like, actually you don't. You provision enough nodes to absorb the nodes you're planning to drain.
Yeah. I'd be very interested in contributing something around, reducing workload disruption during upgrades.
So I think like a two-prong approach of good documentation and examples that are just on the website, like as actual documentation, but then sort of signal boosting that in like a blog post kind of format. I think we want both of those things. So looking at what documentation we have now, working with like SIGDocs and SIG cluster lifecycle and SIG node probably, to make sure what we're saying is the case is actually the case, and we have like examples. And ideally, you could use QAtom and some of the tools we have to drive some of these things. I don't know exactly what QAtom supports here, but at least documenting what we currently have, maybe looking for opportunities for QAtom to drive some of these behaviors if it makes sense, and then signal boosting that. Like specifically for people who can't afford to 2x their cluster or think they have to ripple nodes on every miner, or sort of the things that make it expensive and take a long time.
It's can't afford, or and this might be relevant, of course, because we're coming into KubeCon EU. So I'm thinking about European geo stuff. Can't afford or can't get capacity in the geos they are allowed to use for their specific use case.
Yeah. yeah, they're constrained by budget or by availability or yeah.
Okay, so it
Yeah, so
looks
that,
like
that
we're
seems like
saying,
that seems like
go
a
ahead.
distinct topic from like as a project we're trying to just avoid sort of shooting ourselves in the foot, shooting you in the foot by intentionally like, yep, we knew this would break you and we did it anyway. Like that's one sort of thread, and the other thread is what tools do we have to help as you're upgrading, hopefully like a zero action required release, like just mechanically upgrading. Is there anything internal facing? The idea, I've been pushing on the no action required releases thing pretty hard. I still feel like we could do better in building that mindset into SIG leads and reviewers, approvers, contributors. I would say probably every week I am leaving comments on a PR like, hey, this looks like it's going to break existing use. Is there a way to accomplish this without breaking existing use? I did that this morning, actually. So more as an internal facing thing, we've done SIG lead stuff. We've done contributor summit stuff. Other than like sending an email to Kubernetes dev every week, I'm not sure how else to broadcast this. I guess the PRR stuff, like we asked this question a lot in PRR and we started pushing on it hard there. That's good. Do people have other ideas of other venues or other ways that might resonate with sort of the leads and approvers, reviewers, and contributors, like all the way down the chain to build this into our mindset? Any ideas?
I think it can feel really abstract, but if we try to tie the idea to we care about each other, we don't want to make people's lives worse. We don't want to cause people to ruin their evenings and weekends and lose time with their families because we made a bad choice. Let's not do that. Let's give people better experiences. And then they'll be less terrified of getting an upgrade in place because we start a virtuous cycle of like, things will be okay instead of, I hope those jerks didn't screw me up. Like, no, we're doing this to help people.
Yeah, so maybe like case studies or examples of things that we did that were more impactful than we expected them to be, or big changes that we made that we kind of bent over backwards to make non-disruptive that went pretty smoothly.
I think both of those would be really good examples. Having one of each of those would be pretty illustrative for folks to see.
Yeah, here's one that lots of people were sad, and here's what we learned from it, and here's one where lots of SIGs pitched in and lots of people worked behind the scenes to make it look much less visible to cluster administrators. But then everybody got to be happy.
I think a lot of people don't connect the PRR right now to that. It's just a thing that they have to get done at the last minute, and they're maybe annoyed they have to go make changes to answer those questions. So having something that's more than just during that kind of stressful period towards the end of enhancements freeze would be pretty useful.
Yeah.
The pre-flight check. Do you want all of the happy emojis? How many happy emojis can you collect by doing a pre-flight check as early as possible? And this doesn't have to be a negative thing. This is like we're in this together to make people happier.
Yeah, I think also maybe clarifying for people like different categories of breaking changes or action required changes. Like when I upgrade my cluster, if I have to pass like a new flag to the Kube API server, and if I don't, it doesn't start. like, okay, yes, technically that is action required, but if I don't do it, it's super clear. Like, nope, your upgrade didn't work. If you tested your upgrade at all, like, oh, I need to set this flag.
Mhm.
And once I set that flag, I'm good. Like, I don't have to worry about like, is this going to impact people? Do I have to like gather metrics? Do I have to chase 1,000 users to like change a thing? And so like action required items like that, we still want to avoid them if we can, but those are actually more reasonable because they're very, very clear if you've taken the action or not, and if it's successful or not. The action required that we want to avoid are the like, if you have any users that are doing a thing like this and have this field set in a random API, then you need to chase them down and like make them stop or make them change or make them expect to be broken in some way. And it's like very open-ended and hard to tell if you're impacted or not, or after your upgrade if it was successful or not. And so
And I think to what Jeremy was saying earlier, it says a lot in the data that people want certainty. Like, okay, if it's going to be bad, just tell me so that I can plan to do it at a time that's not going to be business impacting.
Yeah. All right. Let me noodle about ways to maybe signal boost this and make this more concrete. We don't really like, community meetings used to be a place where we could sort of do stuff like this, but attendance really dropped off. I don't feel like that would really, I mean, we don't do those in that format anymore for that reason. Maybe short mailing list sort of blurbs regularly, like, hey, it's time for the monthly let's be nice to our users segment on the mailing list. I don't know.
And you can, there's a number of community channels, you know, podcasts, that sort of thing that we could also feature something on.
Yeah.
I'm sure my podcast co-host would be thrilled if I actually released an episode of the rest of DevOps. Like, I don't think I've done one in like a year and a half, but Kubernetes LTS special edition. Guest starring Micah, Jordan, and Jeremy. With representation from Red Hat, Scott Dodson.
All right. So I think just it sounds like there are sort of three streams here. One is the giving people who are stuck on old versions hope that if they do the work to kind of get past a couple of these hurdles, life really does get better, and this isn't just a treadmill for them. Second is working with SIG cluster lifecycle and SIG node around like things we already support for upgrading less disruptively or less expensively, making sure those are documented and signal boosted. And then the third is sort of an internal facing, reinforcing why this is important and trying to get ever closer to the source so that contributors and people designing things are trying to be non-disruptive and upgrade safe from day one. I'm happy to take the last one especially. A lot of this is sort of reformulating what I talked about in my KubeCon contributor servant talks, and so I'm happy to try to spin up something. Probably pull in some people so it's not just me talking. Like other leads, some of the PRR folks maybe would be a good people to put some of those together.
I'm willing to coordinate a blog post ahead of 1.30. Probably get significant contribution from Jeremy, Mo, etc. Anyone else on this call who wants to. Probably not under my byline, but yeah.
Scott said he was interested in.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in Jordan's second item. So I'll go catch up on what docs we have around that, and you know, look at what we could improve there, and then what we would want to sort of signal boost through a blog post.
I'm adding people's names to.
Great. Thank you.
Do we think it would be useful to send summarizations of the data to the mailing lists as well?
Yeah, I mean, yes.
Okay.
I
I'll
think so,
finish.
yeah.
I'll finish populating the Power or the Google Sheets that I started,
Yeah.
or say Google Slides that I started. Cleaning up a little bit. Scott left a comment on like aligning on verbs or words, so I'll go through that too. And we can send it out to the LTS, maybe to the LTS mailing list for sure, and maybe to the dev mailing list for
Yeah,
broader.
and like, just don't forget our stakeholder SIGs, like so
Yeah,
LTS and then up to like Arch and Node,
yeah.
and like yeah, and Kubernetes dev is fine as well.
And for the, maybe put a link to the deck because I'd love to review it again. I know I saw it earlier, but I think for this sort of thing, we definitely don't want to do the build to the crescendo of conclusions kind of
Mhm.
upfront. The TLDR should probably be pretty soon in case people get sick of clicking through lots of slides of data. Just be like, if you take nothing else away from this, please know, people want their upgrades, possibly with skip, hop, skip, and a jump upgrades.
Okay.
I can also take the first item, the sort of the summary of why life is ever better on newer versions. Like the things you're stuck on don't exist. Those problems don't exist once you get past this point.
Yeah, that's kind of your message around like, I know you think that we keep telling you this, but really, we mean it this time. Just logistically speaking, we have this meeting scheduled for in 2 weeks from now, and then the week after that is KubeCon, I believe. I will actually be out in 2 weeks from now, the week before KubeCon, but I trust you will all have the exciting pre-KubeCon meeting if desired.
All right, cool. Sounds like we got a couple of actions to follow up on. So good next steps. Do we want to plan on having that meeting before KubeCon? Is anybody traveling for KubeCon? We'll be out.
I'm not going to be there actually.
I will not either.
I think it's good to check in on
Status of these
today.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Cool. I'll plan to do that then. All right. Anybody have any other topics they want to dive into?
Code freeze for 130 is coming.
Yeah.
It's not the topic for this. It's just
No, it's yeah.
Code freeze like winter is coming.
It is. Yep.
All right. Well, we'll end here then and give folks a little bit of time back.
Thanks.
Cool.
Thanks.
Hope you have a great rest of your week.
See you folks.
Bye.
Take care.